Hey, folks, welcome to the pre-show. Don't get all excited yet. This is nothing. This is just getting set up, and which you'd think I'd be all ready, but I'm not. And just making sure all the plugs are on, all the junk is going. And here, let's do this. Let's put on our brand. Boom. There it is. Arrange my camera a little better. Yada, yada. Then let's go over here and do our banner. We go live at 3 minutes after the top of the hour. So everybody stand by. I hope everybody's doing well. Greetings over in the chat room. I see Uncle Dave is there. Paige Rockwell Soiree is in the chat room. And we've got Niall Parkinson from Ireland. Don't be offended at my lame accent, but I like doing it. Paul Roney is here. Good to see you, Paul Roney. I know who that is, by the way. Steve Clark, good to see you as well. And we've got our guest is hanging in the wings. I see you over there. Alexandria, I'll call you in a couple of minutes. And I think this is going to be a fun show tonight. So if you've ever thought of writing a book, listen to this show tonight. All right. Who else we got coming in? People are starting to stream in. And don't be shy, or as Ken Ballos would say, don't be afeard now. He said, you come on in and you show your faces and you can talk to everybody here and enjoy yourself tonight. What do we got? We got 2 minutes and 19 seconds after the top of the hour, and it's already changed since I saw that. So, boom, I got to do that. I got to do that. I got to add that. I got to do this. I got to do that. Boom, done. Save. Get rid of that. I don't know about you, but I can hear my kids yelling upstairs. So we'll see how that goes tonight. Okay, we're getting awfully close to showtime. Let me get over there. Where'd it go? I know it's there. There it is. All right, guys, stand by. We're going to go dark, and we'll go live in just a couple of seconds. Stand by.
The Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
That's right, folks. If you can't fake it, you just say you can talk intelligently. This is where you're going to find it. Intelligent talk right here. I'm your host, Scotty Roberts, right here on this, my show, the Intrepid radio program. We broadcast live over on subspace.radio, and you can hear it in its audio format over there. If you'd like to join us for the simulcast in video, just come on over to one of 4 or 5 different places now. You can come to my Facebook pages and see the live stream carried there. That's my page, the Intrepid radio page, the Federation page, the Subspace radio page. And you can also come over to my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Scotty Roberts. And that's where really the main chat room is. If you want to come and join fellow Intrep heads and chat about this show during the show or other things I see a lot of people talking about during the show as well that have nothing to do with the show, which says you're not listening. No, I'm just kidding. I know y'all are. And so welcome, though. Come on over. That's the place to do it. If you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, hit the little subscribe button, then hit the little bell that will give you notifications when this show goes live. And if you're feeling it, hit the join button. If you haven't joined already, you can contribute to this show, help keep it alive, help keep it aware, help keep it awake, help keep the host intelligent. So it's just, I'll just tell you, it's $1 or $5 or $15 a month. However, whatever level you want to come in, you can do that. Boom, there it is. I'm not going to plead for money, but the offering plate will be coming around. So, all right. Thanks everybody for being here. Without further nonsense, nuance, misuse of language, dirty stories, jokes, breaking the ice, or anything like that, we're going to get into talking to our guest tonight. And this is Alexandria Weiss. I met her through my agent, Italia Gandolfo, who is agent for many people I know, Alexandria being amongst them. And Alexandria has written some amazing books, and she's got some amazing stuff to tell you about that. And so I'm going to bring her in right now without further ado. And where did that come from anyway? Further ado. What do you need? Here, will you unplug that plug for me, please? I don't need this. Thank you. And I got to cancel that. Something came up because I hit the button when I leaned over, and I got to get rid of this. Hold on. I don't know why. It's Apple computers are built that way. You hit something, you hit the wrong button, and all of a sudden they want you to buy all their music. So anyway, here we are. Let me arrange this just a little differently. And you know what? I'm going to get rid of this banner, Alexandria, because it's covering your face.
Oh, please
And
cover my face. Cover my face, please. Good God, please cover it.
we want to see you. So, Alexandria, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you
And
for having me.
I've known you for probably about 5 years, is my guess, thereabouts. And I met you, as I mentioned, through our mutual agent, Italia Gandolfo.
Mhm.
And you've done a lot more for her than I have. You are one of those prolific
Yeah.
writers.
Oh, prolific. Okay, yeah, that's one word for
Pro,
it.
prolific. You write and write and write and write. In other words,
Mhm.
and you've got several books out, novels out through Italia. That Italia has had published,
Mhm.
gotten published for you using the right language.
Mhm.
And there's a current series. Let's people know before we start digging into you a little bit and talking about you and what you do, how you write, all of that stuff, where you're from, what you're doing. You've got a new. It's not a new series. It's an accumulating series of books, starting with Death by the River, and I believe that was the first one. And now you've got the third and the fourth is coming out, or is the fourth and the fifth is coming out now in that series?
The series, it's we changed Death by the River was original book that we had, and we redid it and rewrote it and changed some things in it and updated it because originally Death by the River was YA. So we wanted to make this more adult. So it is now River of Ashes was the first book that came out in August. And then the
Okay.
second book is, I can't even remember the name. We've written them. River of Wrath is the second one that comes out in January, and River of Ghosts comes out in August. And it's
All
called the
right.
St. Benedict series because it's set in St. Benedict, Louisiana, which is close to where I live, outside of Covington.
Now, in very brief, is this a series of books that follows a character or a place or a theme?
It follows a family. It's a family who is a very old Southern family. They have a lot of secrets, a lot of atrocities, a lot of madness in their family. And it's a very dark Southern Gothic, horror leaning thriller. And it's really about this family, and it starts with their golden child, the chosen son, Bo Devereaux, and the madness of that has followed this family through their line accumulates and comes to fruition in Bo. And then it is a question of all the things that Bo does and all the people that Bo has hurt, and then the slowly unraveling and their history slowly unraveling, and all the people of St. Benedict, which is a very small town, finding out how crazy the Devereaux family really is and all the atrocities and things that they've done.
All right. And so there is some exciting news that you shared with me about this series of books. Why don't you share that with us?
The series St. Benedict has been optioned, and we have an actress attached. She's a pretty big name actress, and it's just a very interesting process. It's really moving along down. This is a process that snails can outrun. It takes forever. So, I mean, it's just bringing people on board, and they have a writer for the series. They have a showrunner now, and we have this actress who's going to be in it and produce it, and I can't say her name or the studio or anything, but it has been optioned, and we're waiting.
All right. And by saying you have an option, for those of you that haven't quite caught on to what that means yet, that means that it's being optioned for a movie or a series of movies or television.
Television series, television, because we have
First I've
five
heard.
books. Yeah, we have five books in this series, but there's I've written so much back history into the Devereaux family, going back to the 1830s, in the area, how they got the land, um, the the great grandfathers, all the things that they've done, gamblers on Mississippi, riverboats, all this kind of stuff. So we're talking about, if we did all that, then it would then there's offshoot series that we can do and go. So it's got a lot of potential, and I love the characters. They're just so twisted and dark, and all the reviews everybody talks about, it's very dark. It's very, it's people die. There's bones. There's bodies, and it's just fun as hell to write. Just
I'll
really
bet.
enjoy writing it. It's just, and the characters are really fun. I mean, the more bent and twisted, the more fun they are to write.
How deep do you have to dig to get bent and twisted?
Oh God. Not very. I'm a nurse, so bent and twisted was the norm. So especially when you deal with the South, every character you write is a little bit of people and a little bit of stuff you add to it. Um, the lead character in the first book, Bo Devereaux, he he's a misogynist. He abuses women. Um, he's a rapist, and the book was originally written that he's the golden boy. He comes from a rich family. Everybody, he's the boy you always wanted to date. But it was kind of a cautionary tale of, everything is not what it seems, and he is not what it seems. His family is his background, his mind. He's a psychopath, but it's all hiding behind the looks and the glamour of the family and the money. And so it's a cautionary tale, but the story starts centered around Bo, and then it expands to the family and their past, and then all the characters that contributed to this. So that's where it all comes from.
Um, how I got other questions that I already wanted to ask, but now I want to jump on this one. How difficult's not the word I'm looking for. How is it to write a male character that is, first of all, you as a woman, you've got to climb inside
Mm-hmm.
uh, a persona that you're creating. So
Mm-hmm.
how, I guess, difficult is it to write a male character that is all these things, that is the antithesis of what a man should be for a woman? He's a rapist. He's a misogynist. He's a dirty rich money, so to speak. So
Right.
what's that like for you to create a character like that and make him not seem like I'm a male, but I'm written by a female, but a male that comes across like the kind of character you want to write?
Fun as hell. Fun as hell.
Okay.
I he has a psychopath, so you're dealing with psychopathic tendencies. So that's one thing. So there are characteristics that you're going to have. And I'm a nurse, so I've seen a lot of warped characters, dealt with a lot of crazy people. So all that kind of comes into play. So really, when I look at him, and looking at him like a man, is really, it's not for me any different than looking at, I can understand a woman's point of view, but I can understand a man's point of view too. And he is not going to be either male or female. He's going to be a psychopath. He's going to have that egocentric personality that it doesn't matter if he's male or female. He's going to be dominant. And when you're dealing with psychopaths, it doesn't matter if they're male or female. It's that same sociopathic tendency. Everything circulates around them. Those things do not change. So, and it's really studied when you look across them, they're the same. So writing him, that's how I approached him. And I really enjoy writing male characters. Really do. I enjoy them
Yes.
a lot more. They're more challenging for me.
That's interesting. It's funny in some of the material I'm writing for a book that I'm trying to finish that you know all about.
Hmm.
I'm right. The book opens up, and one of the main characters is a female who I've
Hmm.
got fictionally as the first woman to graduate with a PhD from Oxford in archaeology back in the early
Cool.
1920s.
Cool.
And so I'm writing her, and I had to really dig into my own head and what I know of women, which is about this much. Uh,
Smart
and
man.
I watch my wife, I watch other people that I've known, and I write into all that because she's struggling with I put all this time in, this is who I am, this is what I do, but I'm still only an assistant because I'm a woman in a man's world.
Hmm.
And I've got to imagine that writing about a man who is a psychopath, um, I suppose there are some things that are psychopathic qualities, that attributes that are easy to get with. But if I can take any of my experience in writing and trying to make sure the voice is the voice of a woman, you're doing the same thing with the man in your books.
Well,
So,
and it comes down to experience too. You've been around for a while. I've been around for a while. I've dealt with a lot of men. Um, you know, a lot of male doctors, a lot of, married to a doctor, um, married to, you know, a physician. So I know that kind of, personality. But just as you get older, you learn more about the sexes, but the differences between it. I think being married teaches you a hell of a lot more. Um, so, it's the character. And yeah, there are some things like the differences between male and female and how they'll look at things. But like I said, when you get down to that core, and what drives Bo is his anger. He's driven
mhm.
by his anger, and that's can be the same for men or women. So the anger that drives him is the core of who he is. So him being a male and wanting to overpower women and being dominant over women is, that kind of goes along with who he is. That's not that hard to write. Um, just getting in his head was fun. I think,
Sure, sure.
it's just it's it's fun. It's just fun
Yeah,
writing
it's fun.
written event. Yeah.
Right. Um, Niall Parkinson over in Ireland, he says, big buzz about River of Ashes over here on Amazon.
Yeah. Oh,
He
good.
says, he said, tell me, the line between young adult and adult fiction is very slim.
Yeah.
Could these be either by reading the description and themes? Or
Um,
these could be either, he says, by
they
reading this.
could be either, but as the series progresses, the book I was Lucas wrote this story. He based
Mhm.
it in Kentucky. Um, he didn't go into the family background and all that, and there really were no parents in it. And when I came on board, I said, "Look, it's got to be here. I want to make it Southern Gothic, bring that dark, and of course, bring the paranormal, haunted element into it. Um, and I wanted the adults in it because I wanted to show that these are parents who are fighting, who knew what this boy is. The parents know he has a problem and have been hiding it. So that opened up another whole other can of worms for me because it means they're complicit. So also that means they know, and they also know that this goes back, and then this is in the entire family. So I kind of think if you do, and it can go the YA because we have a lot of high school kids in it. The first book and the second book, they grow up and go in college and everything later on. But I think the adults in it and the adult perspective and what there's a lot of going on between the adults and there's a sheriff and everything going on there. So it's not a true YA. We're calling it adult just because we're bringing in more of an adult. I think if you lean more towards having more high school kids in it and less of the adults in there, then you are leaning YA. We are kind of skirting the center with both of them, but it's who knows what genre defines what nowadays. They're all so damn
Right.
different. You can't
Right.
keep up. I mean, seriously, you cannot keep up. So I prefer to call it adult because as we go on in the series, these kids start the book at 17. By the time we're getting to the second book, they're 18. So, and by the time we're getting to the third book, they're in college. So these are going into adulthood. So I just call it adult.
Sure. It's kind of like reading Harry Potter. It's a kid's book when it starts, and by the time you're through those dark last couple of
Mhm.
books, it's really gained an
Really,
adult status. And so
I will say
that's
the only difference between adult and YA is the language.
okay.
Because there's certain words you cannot use in YA books that I prefer to use in my books, and I got kind of censored on you can't say that much, you can't say that much. So um, calling it adult gave me a little bit more freedom with the vocabulary, which anybody that has kids nowadays that are teenagers, they curse more than anybody. So you know,
So the difference between young adult and adult is mother thumper versus mother effer.
right,
So
exactly, yes, yes,
okay.
the F word is the use of the F word is it. I,
Okay. Do you think that kind of thing, we see that in comedy a lot? Comedy used to be what we call cleaner comedy, and everything was innuendo. Now, some of the funniest comedy ends up being those who throw out the Effenheimer every other sentence. It seems. Now, is
well,
that?
go back to Eddie Murphy. Eddie
Yeah,
Murphy, Richard Pryor, they use the F word all the time.
they do. They
They
do.
use it all the time. So that's what a lot of it. But we still use the word, but it was specific for a character. But I don't know. I just there are some limits and things you can do, and I just we needed to push the boundary more. So and it's not this isn't it was never a book intended for a 13 or 14-year-old person to
Right.
read.
Right.
And I will always stress that this is like 16, 17. 16 is probably the lowest I would go. 16, 17, and that's it. So to
Yeah.
me that's adulthood, you know.
Yeah.
So
Do you
that's
find are you pretty in touch with your readers? For instance, when I wrote Tam O'Hare, anthropomorphized rabbits set in England and all of this, I wrote that 15 years ago. But I wrote it for grade school and up, but it was a little heavier. But I found that the biggest buying audience we had, the slice, was college age and up.
hmm
And so now, do you find that with your books, are you really in touch with what kind of readers you have on the other end?
they're adult. They're all adult.
Okay.
It's not YA at all. It's all adult readers and a lot of thriller readers. Um,
Mm.
yeah, it's a lot of thriller, some horror, but it's a lot of thriller readers, and they're all adult. Everybody that I'm in touch with, all the people contacting me, all the bloggers, it's all adult. But
Oh, that's cool.
you get a lot of adults read YA too.
Yeah.
So yeah, but they're all adults. And
Now,
when I first wrote it, I got a lot of heat for why'd you write a book about a guy who raped young girls?
yeah, yeah.
And my feeling was, well, why not? Somebody's got to talk about this. This goes on, and in the book, in the first book, River of Ashes, there's a letter I wrote in the back um, of a friend I knew in high school, and we all everybody. I went to a small high school, so she was going to have this date with this wealthy guy, New Orleans uptown wealthy guy, and everybody knew about the date. Everybody thought it was great, and then after the date, we all noticed how she changed. She didn't, she wore non-revealing clothing. She didn't go out anymore. She stayed away from parties, and it wasn't till this is only a couple of years ago she revealed on Facebook and after she talked to her family and all that, he drugged her and raped her when she was 17.
Wow.
So, and she held on to that until she was in her 50s. So, and she was 16, 17 when this happened. So that's why I wrote this story. So anybody that
Okay.
attempts why you write something like this, well, damn it. Maybe if somebody like her, or somebody reads this and looks twice at somebody and thinks twice about someone, then it served a purpose. So there's no wrong way with information. And as a
Sure.
nurse, I'm going to defend that. Um, I've seen it too many times as a nurse with women coming. I've dealt with a lot of rape victims, and 9 times out of 10, it's somebody they know. So he was a nice guy. He came from a good family and all that. It doesn't matter. It's. So that's why I that's a lot of reason why I went the way I went with that book.
Okay.
And
Now,
Lucas came up with him being this person, but I took it in the direction of we had him that way, but turned it around so the women in the end take back and started getting revenge and it turning into something and taking it into a series where we follow through with the victims and how they fight back and how they each of them deal with what happened to them. And then all this is intertwined with the family legacy and the dynasty of a mad family. So, and it's all set in the South.
and
A lot.
I'm sure you are in your own mind, you're juxtaposing um, the business side of it, if you will. I'm putting in that framework for a reason. The business side being, I have a message. I want to write a good book that's fun for people. And it's about you've got this underlying theme of this atrocious behavior, things you've experienced, things you've seen in other people that you've modeled some things after, but at the same time, you can still say, it's fun. It's fun writing because while
Yeah.
you've got the theme here, you've got the fun of creating the story
Hmm.
that surrounds it.
Yeah,
And
it's fun.
and I was going to ask on that when you mentioned it's a thriller. Um, I've always envied the really good writers who could take a plot, a
Hmm.
thrilling plot, and have so many twists and turns in it, and then they bring you out at the end. But all these twists and turns that are puzzle pieces, they make them all fit together as they're
Yeah,
going. And you could be watching and go, what the fuck?
yeah.
Pardon me for my French. But do you experience that as you're writing? And how do you craft? That's probably a really difficult question to answer, but how do you craft
It's
an intricate puzzle like that?
it takes a lot of the plotting, but the thing about it is, especially with a series, where we're going here, where we're going there, where we're going there, and all the twists that are not going to get answered in one book, but will get answered in another book. So you do have to do a lot of thinking out and plotting, and we do all that. We plot everything out, and but yeah, it's more challenging than writing. You know, if let's say you just have a straight line like romance. Let's just say a romance, boy gets girl, boy loses girl, and there's only but you throw it in different situations and all. This is different. This is throwing in. You really have to think out where you're going to go with this thing, and you have to plot a lot more. Um, and
How
I
do
think
you go about that? What's your process?
um,
Do you get? You're starting to answer, but let me throw in a thought. Does
I
it
wish I could
come?
tell.
Does it just come to you? Do you go, oh,
Yeah.
this story? I'm going to take this, or do you write stream of conscious? Do you just sit down and go, blank slate? Here's my characters. Here's what I want to say. Boom, 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 boom. Or
Okay. You're
are
talking
you
about
one of those
plot
method actors, the method
plotter versus
writer?
pantser. Plotter versus
Yeah.
pantser. So I'm probably yeah. I used to do a lot of just didn't plot, just fly by the seat of your pants. So you're a
Mm-hmm.
pantser,
Mm-hmm.
and I did a lot of that. But
We
when
like
you
to
start
call that
to
stream of consciousness.
pantser,
Seat of my pants.
flying by the seat of my pants. Um, I did that, and it works. But for these kind of books, no, you got to plot it out. I mean, I've got sheets and we've got lists with background and who did. I mean, I've got paperwork and I've got piles of paper where we're going, and it's outlined for book 3 and book 4, and we know where we're going in 5. And so yeah, with I think with any kind of thriller, it's really hard because there's so many pieces. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, and you have to make sure all those pieces fit. Because by the time you get to the end, if they don't fit and you leave questions unanswered, that's fine if you're going in a series. But if it's one book, you got to answer those questions. So you can lose track of that. So yeah, you've got a plot. In a thriller, you've got a plot.
Now, they say that writing too much, one of the mistake a lot of writers who want to try to write a book will
Hmm.
sit down and they'll write so much. Oh, I got to put in the backstory to everything. And they write one sentence and they've got to give 5 paragraphs of backstory to back up their sentence. So there's always been that danger of over backstorying your characters. But now you've got this character you've carried through books. And so you've built up this incredible backstory to his family and so on. Did that come? How did you balance the not writing too much backstory to gloss somebody's eyes over and keeping the narrative rolling versus enough backstory to sell it, and then it just builds and it rolls like a snowball through a series?
But I call that when you put everything down on a character and it's like, okay, here's so and so, and write 3 pages of the backstory. I call that an information dump. And if you do
Information
information
dump.
dumps,
Yeah.
you bore people. It bores
Yeah.
me. If I read something and you got an information dump, I look at that and go, okay, why do I need to know that now? I don't. I look at the things that are vital to tell the story where it is. The information, I don't like to tell everything about a character up front. What's the point? I know everything about the character. I'm not interested in it anymore. For me, it's better to give a little snippet here and a little snippet there about their past, maybe something, a monologue in their head, and talk about bits and pieces so that character is slowly revealed as you go along. You should still be learning about characters in book 3 and book 4 in the series.
Mhm.
You don't want to learn everything about a character up front. And I always tell people, and I've read a lot of books where people do information dumps in the first couple of pages, and I tell them, take that and tell me that through dialogue. Tell me that through actions in a character. Tell me, you talk about he had a past with a lover and she died and in a blaze in a car accident or something. Okay, I don't need to know that up front. Have him go look at a sunset and he gets sad because he's there alone. Then go into that story. Give me an action, give me something, because that's how it works in real life. You don't just
Mhm.
sit there and go, okay, you know,
Here's
and
my
thinking,
backstory.
we don't walk around thinking of our entire life in 3 pages and dump everything. We slowly reveal ourselves. And that's how I prefer to write characters because it keeps them interesting and it
Mm,
keeps the reader interested in finding more about the character.
that's good. Um, Niall, again in Ireland, he says, I'm curious about the young adult themes these days. Is that anything with a definitive line of good and evil tends to be presented as young adult, whereas ambivalence is adult?
I don't think so. I don't see it as that. I see it's open season. I think you can present there's a lot of good and evil in adult books as well, especially if you get into the fantasy genres. That goes along with that. But I don't know. I don't see the ambivalence, especially you're writing a romance, then yeah, there's a lot of ambivalence. But
Mhm.
um
Yeah,
I know. I don't see a difference between that. I think it's more really it comes across in the characters you're writing. If you have a majority of characters you're writing and they're under the age of 17 or 18, then you're dealing with more YA. If you're bringing in characters that there's a mix of adult and young adult people in there, then I think you're leaning like we're doing with St. Benedict more towards adult. Um, it really I think even publishers will have a hard time telling you this is strictly YA, this is strictly adult, because I think that there's a
sure.
lot of murky water there. And then if you get into new adult, which is you see more with romance, and the new adult is considered college age, but a lot of other people tell you that's adult, and that was really new adult was hot a couple of years ago, especially in romance, and now it's kind of gone back into adult. So that's how we see it.
Pardon me 1 second. Familial interlude. Good night. I love you. She came. They always come and interrupt, and she came. She was standing on the other side of the computer. And she says, "Can I say good night?" And I said,
Oh,
"Yeah, come
so
on over."
cute. No,
So that's my little one. That's the 8-year-old. Everybody here knows her. So for the most part, we have some exciting talk going on over in the chat room, but it has nothing to do with the show. So I'm seeing some snippets go by. Excuse me. So let's talk a little bit about your background, because all people know so far is you're from the South, and that the town that you have, is it a fictional town or it's in a
no,
town that's
actually,
a real town?
Saint Benedict. Actually, it's there's a seminary there, and I have in the book. It's an old abandoned seminary, but there is actually a Saint Joseph Seminary in Saint Benedict, Louisiana, on the Bogafilaya River, and I drive over the Bogue every day to get to Walmart and the grocery store, and it's right on the river, and there's an abbey there, so it's based on a real place. In the book, I have it as abandoned, and all the kids hang out at the abbey, and it's haunted and all that kind of stuff. But it does
Nice.
exist. hmm It's real.
Now, you grew up in New Orleans, correct?
Mhm.
Or you technically you're in New Orleans now, like you're a suburb or a
No,
small town near New Orleans?
no, I'm about 50 miles out. I'm
Okay.
Lake Pontchartrain is
Okay.
New Orleans. I'm what we call the North Shore. I'm across Lake Pontchartrain. I lived in New Orleans all my life. I grew up in the French Quarter and Lakeview, and anybody who remembers Katrina remembers all the water in Lakeview. And my husband and I moved to where we are now about 2 weeks before before Katrina hit. And
Okay.
our house in Lakeview had 12 and a half feet of water.
Wow.
So yeah, it was it was a mess. So we've been up here for 17 years now. So yeah, I grew up in the city and still have a ton of friends in the city. So yeah,
Now,
New Orleans border.
you had as your influences, and obviously the city of New Orleans.
Mhm.
You had the paranormal that's associated with New Orleans, which you've told me some stories out of the past. You also had, I'm going to combine these all and just kind of let you talk about it all. You also grew up in a family that was very close to the film industry in New Orleans
My dad,
and production. You knew
yeah,
Tennessee, I was just going to say Tennessee, Ernie Ford.
Tennessee,
That's not who we're talking about.
Tennessee Williams, Tennessee Williams.
Tennessee Williams, but one of those Tennessee guys, and
Mm-hmm. Streetcar named
you knew
Child.
him, yes, and you knew this man very well, and you grew up with this.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about your past that has really let you become what you're doing.
My father had an independent motion picture production company in the French Quarter in New Orleans on Dumaine Street, right across from Madame John's Legacy. Anybody that knows Madame John's is like the oldest place
And
in
by the way,
town.
let me just say, Uncle Dave over in the chat room, listen to this. Dave's a friend of mine. He's been in film production for years. Anyway, go ahead.
And so I grew up on motion picture sets. My dad did some big productions. We did Live and Let Die, Fear Zuki, My Name is Nobody with Henry Fonda. He was a
Mm-hmm.
very, very nice man. He was very nice to me. And did a lot of big movies, did a lot of small movies. And so I learned, my dad put me in front of the camera, which I hated. And I learned everything behind the camera, how to edit 35 millimeter film, how to do cinematography, how to full focus, how to load 35 millimeter mags. I've learned it all. And my dad had a very eclectic group that would hang out in the quarter with us. And Tennessee Williams, he lived right around the corner on Royal. He had a place on Royal. And Tennessee used to come by in the morning. And first they started out with gin rummy, then they went to backgammon. And so he taught me how to cheat at gin rummy. And I was
Nice.
good. I was a little kid, and a very in an artist artists used to come out. Al Hurt, everybody, we all called him Jumbo. Jumbo would come by. And New Orleans is a very, very, very small town, and so in jazz musicians and painters and artists and everybody. So it was a very bohemian upbringing. And Tennessee used to come around, drink coffee and Cavassier, and play gin rummy and hang out. And he and I would talk, and we'd talk about his books, and
Nice.
talk about how he comes up with characters. And he was a very, very, very kind man, very nice to me, and we'd talk. And it was just, it was just a very strange upbringing, but that contributed to a lot of the creativity and bringing all that out.
What a neat relationship to have. And I could never say I was a Tennessee Williams aficionado or anything like that. And we had to read a little bit of him in school, but he's not the one that they had you memorizing sections of his books or anything like that. The school
Well,
I went to, anyway.
in New Orleans, we all had to read Streetcar Named Desire, and
I'm sure.
yeah, and I remember I was senior year, and I had an English teacher, and we all had to do a paper on Streetcar Named Desire, and one of the questions was, what do you think the writer Tennessee Williams thought about this, and what was he thinking when he wrote this? So I had my dad call him so I could ask him, and I put that in my paper, and my teacher said, "Oh, this is untrue. He didn't think this," and all this kind of stuff. So she was going to fail me on the paper because she thought I was making it all up. And my dad called him in New York, and Tennessee called my English teacher and said, "I think you got this wrong." So he actually he did things like that. He's just a nice guy. He's just a really nice guy.
What a wonderful way to grow up, to have somebody like that. I know, like you had. I'm getting old enough that I'm blanking on names all the time these days. To Kill a Mockingbird, and her friendship with Truman Capote. They
Yes.
grew up. I'm not saying it's the same thing, but it's that kind of thing where they grew up friends together. Now he was obviously older than you, but that's the
Oh,
first thing that came to my mind.
but I remember, and it's really, I didn't know who he was. I did not
Mhm.
know who he was. I was a kid, I was really small. And I remember he and I sitting one day, they were all doing something, and he came and sat with me. And I remember asking, "How do you write your characters?" And he told me how he uses bits and pieces of people he knows and builds the characters from that. And he told me, he said, you really got to feel the characters. You got to, they, when they're real to you, then they're real to the reader. So make that character real. Bring everything in that's going to be real. And I'm telling you, I was 4 or 5, and I remember that. And it's weird that you remember something like that.
I'm
But
sure.
but I remember that, and I remember my dad going, "You know who he is, right?" I'm like, "No, I have no idea who he is. Who is he?"
Yeah, yeah.
A kid doesn't know. A kid doesn't care. And but I knew as I got older, and yeah, it was just very much influenced by that. And of course, and the other side of I write a lot of paranormal and stuff like that. Because
Yeah.
the place where we had and we lived in had stuff. It was all haunted, so ghosts were normal. Ghosts were normal for me, and people ask me, "Oh, do you really believe?" Yeah, I do because I've seen it.
Do you still where you live now?
No, there's nothing. No, there's nothing here. Actually, I do have a piece that's is an antique, a big armoire that my husband bought, and it's haunted. And there's a guy that comes out and he walks around, but he doesn't bother anybody. But that's the only piece I have that's haunted. And yeah, that's haunted. But you just, it was, lights would go on and off, radios would go on and off, things would move one place and then they'd be somewhere else. There was, there was, you hear knocking at night. There would be knocking on
Hmm.
the wall.
Hmm.
Occasionally, if you walk by a mirror, you'd see a face in it, and then you look back and it'd be gone. Um,
That's
it,
always fun.
yeah, and there was it was there was always something. And in the French Quarter, everybody has ghosts. Everybody has ghosts. And actually, when they sell buildings in the French Quarter, they have to put signs on it. Is it haunted or non-haunted? And that's on the for
Oh,
sale sign.
really?
Yeah, if you
That's
walk in the
interesting.
French Quarter, you'll see haunted, non-haunted on signs. So that's how common it is. So everybody that
Wow.
lives down there has ghosts. Oh yeah.
That leads me to a question I saw once again. Niall asked a question about. Let me see if I can scroll back to it. You must have come into close contact with Southern Gothic occult, voodoo, colonial, artistic, and musical backgrounds. A fascinating part of the world.
Actually, there was a voodoo priestess that lived next door to us, and she would have voodoo ceremonies out in her courtyard. And she's the one that taught me a lot about voodoo. And of course, if you have anything to do in New Orleans and you go anywhere near the French Quarter, you have a very healthy respect for Marie Laveau from a very young age, and you don't talk bad about Miss Marie. I mean, you don't. Um, so everything down there, you learn that. But she taught me a lot about the voodoo spirits and ceremonies, and she'd do a lot of rituals and stuff. And you'd be sitting out in the courtyard, and then you'd hear the drums and everything, and the music going next door. And what's going on?
Yeah,
So that was normal. And then um,
that was normal.
that was normal. And in June is the 22nd. It's the 22nd or 23rd, which is St. John the Baptist Day. It's a big celebration in New Orleans. You go to Bayou St. John. There's a lot of voodoo ceremony there. So voodoo is very much everybody juju. Everybody knows you grow up with
Hmm.
juju. You got gree and you get gree from the cemeteries, and it's just it's a way of life. I mean, you're
Yeah,
used to it, and you don't. It's not considered abnormal or anything. It's very much normal. And the whole mystique in the French Quarter. If you ever walk around Jackson Square, you have tarot card readers, you have fortune tellers, you have voodoo shops in the French Quarter. Your places you can go and get your palm read, your tea leaves. I mean, and then there's always ghost tours walking around. It's very much a whole vibe in the quarter. It's more prevalent now. When I was growing up, that wasn't really that wasn't really a touristy thing. People didn't know about the ghost thing. Anne Rice contributed a lot to that, and the goth movement and everything brought all that in.
right.
But everybody just had their own ghosts, and everybody's, that's my ghost, whatever. So it was very much a tight community thing.
Did you have a family ghost when you grew up?
Where I grew up in a house on off of St. Charles Avenue on Jackson, and there was a maid, and she hung out in the master bedroom, and you'd see her out of the corner of your eye. But she was she didn't hurt anybody. She was like you'd see her and you'd see like a flash go by. What the hell is that? But she was, you just get a sense that they're nice. They're not going to hurt you. And I guess being where I'm from, you kind of learn from a young age to attune it. As they're going to hurt me? Is it out? And you just live your life. You go on, and they just leave you alone. I mean, they don't bother you. You just sometimes will scare the crap out of you, but it's like otherwise that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's
Does it scare you anymore? Since you were it was such a common thing where you grew up, the area you were in, where everybody accepted it,
mhm,
except haunted, not haunted. Uh,
mhm.
was there anything that affected you? And I mean in either a positive or a negative way that you have utilized in your storytelling? Or is there a particular thing that you remember that you grew up with? You said, this was a profound experience I had.
Um, the cottage we had on Dumaine, there was always the attic was always kind of sealed off, the front part of the attic, and we always used to hear banging and everything from there. And we finally broke
Of
through
course. Yeah.
and got up in the attic, and you went to the very front part of the attic that faced the street, and there was a lot of old materials and lanterns and up there. And I think the creepiest thing that ever happened was we found the Bible. It was a family Bible, and it was open to the exorcism page. And this Bible
Oh,
dates back to the 1860s. And the old lamps are dated back. We had people date them to like the 1880s and stuff. That was creepy. That kind of not seeing the
I'll
ghost,
bet.
but seeing that stuff. That was creepy. I think all of it influenced my writing because whenever I write anything paranormal, I try to make it normal. I tried to make it like the ghosts are normal. This is normal and not something unusual or out of. I mean, it's unusual and it's different, and but everything I write, I always try to include something paranormal in it. I think that's just how I write. That's the way I am.
Sure. Well, I've always said I reject this notion that we have this dichotomy, the normal and paranormal, or normal and natural and supernatural. I say I think they're all the same thing. There's just certain things you can experience, certain things you can't experience, or it takes a lot of effort to experience something, or you have to be open to something, or whatever it might be. So piercing certain veils,
Right.
and
But again, it goes back to how you're raised. I was just raised as
right.
normal. I was raised with all that, and then when I met my husband, and he was not raised with that being normal, so he
Uh-huh.
thought we were all crazy, and and he's changed over the years.
Yeah,
he's,
yeah.
he's changed. Now
Was
he's
he
like,
from New
"What?"
Orleans? Was
Yeah,
he from?
he's,
Okay, all right.
he's from Metairie, which is Jefferson Parish. So he grew up in Jefferson Parish, and Orleans Parish is where New Orleans is, because we have parishes down here. So yeah, he was yeah, but he didn't grow. French Quarter is a very different kind of upbringing, but that was a lot of my father. My father really influenced me with all that kind of stuff. My mother was Irish. Oh, oh, Jack, you just, oh, Bosch. Bosch was her favorite word. So just always a bunch of Bosch. So she, she didn't really buy any of it. She'd just be like, "Well, that's your father," you know. So I was, so I grew up with both worlds. My mom used to be,
Nice.
my mom was a nurse. So, and she worked for a big hospital here, and she was an operating room nurse. And so I think my mother put it the most succinctly when she said, in my father's world, you get to do it over and over again. You do take and take until you get it right. But in her world, you only got one take to get it right.
Uh, uh,
So I always thought that was very profound, but it was true. So that's, when I grew up being, when dad wasn't home, if he was off shooting and mom had to go to the OR to cover for a case or something. So I grew up in a hospital. I grew up in a nursing lounge. I grew up knowing all these doctors and nurses. And of course, my mom's going to make sure I know every part of the human anatomy by the time I'm 8 years old. So I grew up in that world where I had his
sure.
creativity and then her very much medical, logical way. So I grew up in two very separate worlds.
So for you, uh, do you get a chance to do it over and over again, or is it one time only?
For what? Chance to do over and over again.
See, I kind of felt that your statement when you said dad was this way, or was it dad and mom was this way over and over again, or mom said it's only one time. Were you speaking of spirituality, of the
No, no,
afterlife?
I was thinking about life.
Oh, oh,
In
okay.
medicine,
All right.
in the OR, you only have one chance to get it right with a patient.
Oh,
Otherwise, but when my dad's
see,
world,
my
do it
mind
over
went a
and over
totally
again.
different direction with that. Sorry about that.
No, nothing, no, nothing like that.
Well, let the question stand. What do you think?
um,
What are you
as
willing to share?
No, as far I really do think that no, I definitely think we go on. There's no doubt about that in my mind. We everything goes on. Energy is neither created nor destroyed, so it continues. And I think I think you have to do a couple of lives to get it right to figure it out for yourself.
Hmm.
And maybe screw it up in one life and you got to figure it out in the next life. Who knows? But I definitely people we don't die if we do not
Okay.
die. And that is speaking from how I grew up, but also speaking from a medical standpoint and what
Hmm.
I've seen in
Okay.
medicine. You will never meet more spiritual people than in medicine because they've seen it. We've seen, I, I have more horror stories from medicine and things happening to people and dead people and all this kind of stuff than growing up with ghosts and everything. It was I think medicine makes you very much a spiritual person because it makes you realize there is more to it. There's much
Yeah.
more to it than what we see.
And I've heard so many stories of doctors and nurses in hospitals and settings like that that have experienced more paranormal than people might think,
Oh
because
yeah.
there's a lot of dying people. There's a lot of uh,
We have something called we have near death visions, but you have we call near death experiences, NDEs, where, and I saw a ton of these, where patients who you know are dying start talking to family members, and they know those family members are dead. And they'll tell you, oh, that's my sister. She died a couple of years ago. She said she's coming to get me. And our rule of thumb is if they start talking to family members, get the code cart by the door because they're going to die. And it always came true, always. I had a lot of family members talking to relatives, and they know they're dead, and they're coming, and they're telling them they're coming to get them. My father's standing right there. He said he's waiting for me.
Wow.
And they know. And you hear that a lot. You hear that a lot, especially if you work with a lot of terminal patients. And talking to patients, too, who have had near-death experiences, who have died and come back and tell you what some doctors would accept it and listen to them, some wouldn't, but a nurse will always listen to you, and they want to talk about it and tell you what they know. So you hear all of that, and you see it. There's always one room on a wing or one room in a hospital that always has a funky feeling, and everybody dies in there. That's it.
Sure.
It's
Sure.
like, we see it a lot in medicine. So medicine, if anything, it makes you much more spiritual because you see some minutes from everything.
That's good to know. We've got about a minute and a half left before we end the radio part of the broadcast. I invite you to stick around for a few minutes if you want to answer some questions. We continue to go live into the just the chat room and the YouTube channel, but tell people where they can find your books.
My books are available at booksellers everywhere, especially Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple. We also have for River of Ashes, we have an audiobook of the book. So, and then if you want to learn more, you can go to my website, which is ALEXANDREAWEIS.com, and it has all my books that I've published, which is like 36, 37, I've lost count. And so
37.
Yeah, 30. I think it's 37. I think I passed up 100 the other day.
Wow.
Written over 100. Yeah, I just write.
You write and write and write.
I write. I have no life. It's just animals, feeding animals, taking care of animals.
We didn't even get into the animal part. Maybe I'll ask you a couple of questions. We'll keep you as long as we can keep you tonight. So here's what we're going to do. You and I are going to go out. We're going to say goodnight to the radio audience. We're going to run a couple of bumps in here, and we'll come back live in the chat room. So don't go away, Alexandria. I'm going to take you out right now, but sit right there. Don't go away. All right, everybody. Especially over on the radio station, I want to say goodnight to you all. Thanks for being here. Thank you for giving me your time. And we will see you next time. Join us in the chat room right now on the YouTube channel. Live long and prosper.
Join us every weeknight at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. The Intrepid radio program, a Scotty Roberts Productions broadcast.
Well, Army Hearties, welcome to the Captain's Cabin. This is the official after show, thusly named by you, the listeners, many moons ago. So I want to welcome you back. We're off the radio now. We let our hair down a little bit anyway. It's time when everybody can call in if they want to call in and talk. And I've got Alexandria WEIS, who I'm bringing right back in right now because we're going to talk just a little bit more as long as we can keep her tonight. And welcome back, Alexandria.
Thank
Alex.
you, Scotty. Yeah, Alex. Yeah.
See, we're familiar. I can call her Alex. So,
I've known you how many years now, Scotty? A couple, huh?
I know we were talking an awful lot when I was down in Texas, and that was 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago. So back then, and back when you were working on, was that when you had me doing some maps for you for your
maps from Realm, yeah,
for
you
Realm, yeah.
yeah.
And tell people what that book's about,
So, Realm,
because you're a historian as well.
Yeah, I'm a big history buff. Realm is the story about the wife of Alexander the Great, Roxana. He married 3 times, but that's the girl he married in Bactria, and she gave birth to his only his only legitimate heir. He had another illegitimate heir, but she gave birth to his son Alexander Aegeus, who she was 7 months pregnant when he died. And it's her story about when they met. He met her in Bactria, and she traveled with him all over India and went back and through when he went to Afghanistan and when he ended up dying in Babylon, and she was with him the whole time. He had 2 other wives, but he had left them in Susa, where he left all the royal family, but he took her with him everywhere. And I always, ever since I read about that when I was like 16, I always thought, there's something there. He really cared for her. There was something. So I wrote her a story about up until he died, and then the 14 years she lived after with the boy, his son. So that was Rome. Yeah, and he did the map and showing everything and everywhere she went.
Now, I don't know the history very well. Did Alexander have heirs that lived on after him?
Yes, he had the son he had with Roxanne lived till he was 14, and then Cassander, who took over Macedonia, had Roxanne and the boy killed, and they were buried in Virginia, where Philip was buried. They did find a woman in her 30s and a 14-year-old boy's bones, and that's them. He also had an illegitimate son, Helios, that he had with a woman. Her name was Barzine, that he was with right before Roxanne, and Helios was killed around the same time they killed his son. They wiped out the family. They killed his sister, who she was, her name was Cleopatra. She was on her way to marry Ptolemy in Egypt, and they killed her. I think Antigonus killed her. The mother, of course, Olympus, was killed, and they killed off his 2 boys. So they wiped out the family line.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Wow. Folks, I just pasted the link to call into the chat room. If you want to talk with Alexandria, we're going to keep her for just a little bit. I don't want to abuse her and overuse her tonight, but we'll stick around as long as she wants to stick around. And if you've got some questions or would like to talk with her, you can call into that link. And some of my regulars who call in, Sarah Yusuf, I saw that you had posed a question a ways back, and I didn't get to it because we kind of shifted in subject matter. But if you still want to ask that, you can ask it or call in and ask it. Let's see. Okay, they're talking about, I saw some talk going on, some banter in the chat room about some regulars going at it about scripture and stuff like that. So we'll leave you guys to work that one out. And but you can certainly call into the show if you got a question. Uncle Dave usually calls in, and Professor Bauer calls in, and so it all depends on who's going to call in. If not, I just got you to myself, and we'll talk. So if you got questions, you don't want to call in, just post them in the chat room, folks, for Alexandria. And I know I get kind of stuck on this paranormal thing because it's something that I'm pretty close to. To say it's near and dear would be misnomers. That's not what they really are. It's an interest. It's something I've been in for quite a long time, and I've seen too much. I used to be a skeptic. I was a believing skeptic until I got pushed, slapped, shoved, my hair pulled, fingers run through my hair, ghosts telling me, "How you doing?" And to an old brothel and stuff like that. I don't know if she was soliciting me or she thought I was handsome. I don't know which one it was, but we got a voice that said, "What you doing there?" She said to me with that tone. And so all of this stuff, those are the little things. You have all this other stuff. I've experienced way too much to not believe that there's reality to it. It's how you define it. What are you actually getting? Are you getting a ghost? Are you getting the whole biblical demons mimicking people? Or what are you getting? And so what's your take on that? You've had experiences and you've been close to it, and you know so many people that have been close to it and lived in an area where it was all close. What's your take on all of that? And while you're answering that, I'm going to bring Dave Potter in too.
I think you have different kinds of hauntings. I think you have imprinting. I think you're having imprinting left over from, traumatic things that have happened in the past. You have that. I think you can still have actual hauntings where you're dealing with, an intelligent person that's going to answer questions and do things. I think there's a lot of different things, but a lot of it can be a lot of imprinting because, that's probably why a majority of it is in the French Quarter. So much happened there. And
Yeah.
so much happened, and a lot of it was violent over a long time. I mean, New Orleans is still a violent place. And it was violent in it.
They don't speak very highly of New Orleans these days. If you look at one aspect of the news, how it's become so much more violent.
No, it's bad. It's bad. I mean, I grew up there. I know what it was like, but
it was always easy to die in New Orleans.
Yeah,
that's Dave Potter.
Yeah,
that's who we affectionately refer to as Uncle Dave.
It's easy.
And Sarah Yusuf has joined us as well.
There's no cops. There's no cops. They need 2,000 cops. I think they have about 600 or 700 in the whole city.
Wow.
I can't even imagine what Mardi Gras is like right now.
Oh my goodness.
Well, it's not Mardi Gras right now.
No, but I mean, but without police, I just can't even imagine what that would be like.
What they've done is they've cut the parade routes. I mean, you used to have really long down St. Charles from Napoleon, and they go all the way down, and they've cut all the parade routes. They've basically told all the Orleans Parish parades, because Jefferson Parish has them too. They've told them all, your routes are going to be cut in half because there's not enough cops.
Wow. Yeah. Not enough policing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've got opinions about that too. So I don't live in New Orleans, but in general, I have opinions about that.
It's happening everywhere. It's ridiculous.
Look, it's an urban city with a big mess. And if you look at Orleans Parish and what they have no cops, they have nothing. It's totally lawless. It's a mess. And everybody living there will tell you it's a mess. And you go right next door to Jefferson Parish and they got all the cops.
Oh, really?
Yes, they have no shortage in their department at all. It's an Orleans Parish cop thing. It's an NOPD thing. It's always been an NOPD thing. And they know they have a problem. The police chief just quit.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I may have heard that, but I don't know it for sure. Now
I
do.
it's corrupt as hell too. City's
Wow.
corrupt.
Steve Clark says, Alexandria, what is your take on someone seeing death angels of people who die within 24 hours? I'm assuming he's asking.
Yeah, definitely. People see angels coming to visit, or
Excuse me.
people see somebody that has died and that comes back to visit them, either in a dream or, things happen. Yeah, it's just, yeah, definitely. I've had that happen to me too. So, seeing somebody or having some strange thing happen to you after somebody died that's related to that person.
Sure.
Seeing or having, yeah, absolutely.
Now, have you had those kinds of experiences, either professionally or family? Okay.
Personally, yeah, my mom died when I was 22, a long time ago, and and she was of course a nurse. So within a day of her, I started seeing things around the house that were her things that had moved, stuff that was
Mm.
around. It was her stuff, and it was moving, and I didn't move it, and my dad didn't move it. So yeah, it always things like that. Always perfume, smell the perfume constantly. Um,
Wow.
all these little things. Yeah, her perfume was everywhere. So yeah, I believe in that.
We got Sarah Yusuf is also called in. Sarah's a pretty regular caller. How you doing, Sarah?
Hey guys,
What's going on?
I was just listening in. I did have a question though. I know that you guys were kind of talking about, the paranormal culture and how in thriller books, you present everything in a certain way, and then you just have to, turn it on its ear to, make it go right or left or whatever way that you go. But when you are discussing paranormal culture as it is in your books, do you typically go like the traditional route with when it comes to New Orleans, like voodoo and a lot of that stuff? Or do you get into like the more obscure cultures, like things that happen in Gullah culture or uh, other areas, Western Africa,
Oh
different
no, I
types of
don't.
things?
Yeah, every book. I have a series, the Blackwell series. Blackwell series deals a lot with voodoo and New Orleans voodoo, hoodoo, whatever you want to call it. This series, the Saint Benedict series, no, it's paranormal, but a lot of that is you have a lot of paranormal different Cajun culture, and then you have the Creole culture, which are two
Right.
different things. So I deal a lot with the Creole culture, and then Southeast Louisiana had a very indigenous people's population. We had a lot of Choctaw. We had a lot of just tons of them, and it was originally the Indians used that area along the river that was settled in New Orleans as a trading post. So we have a lot, and you have a lot of the people that came here intermarried with the population.
The intermixing, yeah.
That's where you get a lot of the Creole from and the Cajun from, and so all that everybody's culture. Yeah, I usually delve into a little bit of everything. Yeah, so it's not necessarily related to voodoo. It depends on the story. Um, with a book called Have You Seen Me, which was a thriller series, and that dealt a lot with the cultures, like the Creole culture that was in Franklin, Louisiana area. Yeah. So it depends on the area, because there's so many different places down here.
Very interesting.
Dead cat without hitting something.
We've also got Niall himself from Ireland, who had a lot of
Niall.
questions
Hey, Niall.
earlier. Welcome, Niall. How you doing, brother?
Really enjoying the show. Hello,
All right.
Alexandria. Alex.
No, Alex.
It's easier to say than Alexandria.
It
at
is.
this time of
It's
the night.
fewer syllables.
Where are you in Ireland? Where are you?
I live in Galway, but I'm from Dublin.
Okay.
Yeah.
My mom and her family was all they're in Northern Ireland, outside of Londonderry.
No,
They were
well,
yeah.
that's everyone in the world has Irish heritage
Yeah.
somewhere. Yeah. There was two things I wanted to ask you about, Alex. I posted them in the comments, but it was fascinating. One is your background as a nurse and your experiences with near death and patients who are passing on.
Mhm.
and the other one is New Orleans. I suppose I'll start with New Orleans. I was there once in '98. I spent a week in New Orleans, and I found it a really fascinating town. And I would describe it as a town because everything is very easy to find,
Yeah, it's a small.
and it's not some place you would get lost in. But the atmosphere, I wouldn't describe it as bohemian, but it's kind of like it's almost like a thinning of the veils. The atmosphere, the air that you breathe is different. And I've been around the states and in the normal cities and the normal environments, but I think it's a very unusual
Mhm.
place. I think it's a. Would you agree that that's the case? I mean, you grew up there, so all these influences kind of came together into a place where I would describe as a thinning of the veil of dimensions, and I know that a lot of that has to do with the practices that go there, but also the open belief systems and the colonial influence and all that kind of stuff. Um, would you expand on that just a little bit in your experience?
Um, it is a very different place. It's very different. I've been in a couple of cities, lived in a different cities across the country, and there's no place like New Orleans
Mm,
anywhere in the United States. It's not. My mother was from Ireland, so she was European, and she would always say New Orleans reminded her very much of a European town.
hmm
It's not an American town. And the French influence, of course, if you've been here, French is everywhere. I mean, we all
Yes.
grew up, I grew up speaking Cajun French. We all learned some kind of French down here. So, in that sense, that is different. But I think it's just for me sitting here talking about, oh, yeah, we all got ghosts. Everybody's got a ghost, had a ghost growing up. Um, that's different because nobody will look at you funny down here. If you say, "Oh, I had a ghost," oh yeah, we have ghosts. That's 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 what's different down here. Nobody poo-poos that. Nobody says no, that's not true. And even very staunch Catholics is a very very Catholic town. It's a
Mm,
very Catholic town, very heavily influenced Catholics. Even the rituals of the Catholic Saint Joseph's Day, it's a big holiday here. Um,
yes.
and so you have all those kind of influences, but I think you're looking at all the different people coming into the town, the French, the Spanish, all the slaves that ended up here, all the Creoles and the
It
Cajuns.
sounds a lot like Ireland.
Yeah,
Yes, and that's precisely why I asked it, Alex, because the sensation I got when I got there, and I know that you're into the paranormal and you write about it, and obviously your upbringing has had something to do with that, but just the air was different, and I
mhm,
think it's because of all of these different influences and all of the historical and emotional colonial and it's very hard to
and you,
describe. It's
it,
almost like a European
when
city kind of just dumped in
in
the
the middle of the
states.
United States,
Yeah,
yeah, that's exactly.
yeah, and they all have to kind of figure out what all these old houses and streets kind of represent and who these old families are. And where all these strange influences can come from spiritually
When you talk
and
about the way it feels, there's
mm.
no. If you ever Jackson Square, everybody knows Jackson Square, St. Louis Cathedral.
Yeah,
Been
of
here,
course, yeah. And it was so easy to find. It says West Jackson Square. It's over there. Oh, okay.
you can
Yeah,
find it. But
yeah.
if you're in Jackson Square late at night, and I always tell anybody, you really want to feel how different New Orleans is, go to Jackson Square at 2 or 3 in the morning when
Mm,
nobody's around. Try not to get killed or mugged, but it's that's when you feel how New Orleans is different. It's
mm,
just got a feel. The whole French Quarter at late at night. There's nothing better than walking around the French Quarter at 1 or 2 in the morning because that's when you really felt the ambience of the buildings and just everything that comes together there. And then sometimes you'd be lucky to hear there's a Father Pito who was he worked at St. Louis Cathedral. He was a monk that worked there probably 150 years ago, and he used to sing in the alley next to it. And you can
Oh,
still hear him singing at late at night, like 3 or 4 in the morning if it's foggy. You can hear Father
goodness.
Pito singing away. So that's what I'm saying. That's normal, and that's that essence of the city that really just comes through really at night when it's dark and it's foggy, and man, you can feel that city. You really
Yeah.
can.
I was reminded of just a little meme type of a graphic thing I put up a week or so ago. It could have a little romanticized gushiness to it, but this is what I'm reminded of when you talk. You being a writer, listen to this, and I called this up just so I could read it. It says writers are forgetful, but they remember everything.
No
They
doubt.
forget appointments and anniversaries, but they
Nate,
remember they
thank you.
remember what you wore, how you smelled on your first date. They remember every story you've ever told them, like ever, but forget what you've just said. They don't remember to water the plants or take out the trash, but they don't forget how to make you laugh. Writers are forgetful because they're busy remembering the important things.
That's very nice.
Now, that's what I think of when I talk to you. You grew up in a place where everything is sensory, it seems.
Mhm.
It's you can look at where you grew up and look at it as black and white and talk about facts and figures and so on, but you're remembering the sensations. Walking down, go to when you're just now saying, uh, go out there at 3 in the morning. You might hear Father Peter. What did you say his name was? Singing.
Pita, Pita, Padre Pita, Padre
Uh,
Pita.
so yeah, they're very
Or
interesting.
another thing, sitting on Jackson Square, if there's a couple of restaurants around there, but if you sit inside a building that sits on Jackson Square when it rains in New Orleans, and anybody from New Orleans will tell you, the best part of the time and when you're in that French Quarter is when it rains. Listening to that
Really,
rain. Oh, the rain in New Orleans is no, it doesn't rain like anywhere else on earth. The rain in New Orleans,
describe the rain in Jackson Square to me.
it's the sound of the rain on the slate because it's all slate now all
Mhm.
around the square, but it's the sound of that rain. And then Jackson Square is, you have the Fontabula apartments on both sides, and then
Mm.
you have the Cabildo and the Presbytere and St. Louis Cathedral, and it's the sound of that rain hitting the slate and echoing between that area. And it's just really a soulful sound. Anybody that's been in New Orleans or from New Orleans will tell you the best part of going to the Quarter is when it rains. You love to go to the Quarter when it rains. It just has a different feel to it.
Wow.
Mm.
That's what it's just. Rain in New Orleans is just, it's good. When it
Yeah.
floods, no, that's not so good. But
Well, yeah, you're on the
we
ocean there.
got we get a lot of flooding. But yeah, the rain. If you ever go, I tell anybody, if you go to the French Quarter in New Orleans, get on some cafe or something you can sit on the side of Jackson Square and catch a storm. Get her some rain and just sit there and listen and drink and listen to the rain.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I just have one more question, and then
Go right ahead now.
because that was one of them. I've been there. New Orleans is a very special place. My question was like, do you believe there's a thinning of dimensional veils paranormally? But maybe there isn't. But maybe in some parts of the world there are.
In that city,
Um,
yeah, in that city,
yeah, yeah, I think so. I,
anybody
th-
anybody from that town will tell you that there's too much that has happened there. There's too many different influences there.
yeah,
There's too many cultures that have come through there.
yeah,
There's been a
yeah,
lot of misery. There's been a lot of suffering, um, and there's just too much that's happened down there. And anybody will tell you, grew up
yeah.
in that city, in the Quarter, tell you, oh yeah,
Yeah, it's a place I've always been fascinated with, and since I've always wanted to go back there. I've always wanted to live there. Although I know they have their crime
no,
problems now,
no,
and there is the decadent side in New Orleans and all the rest. But ultimately, it's a fascinating place. But the other thing I wanted to ask you, Alex, and I don't want to keep everyone waiting
no.
because I'm Irish. I tend to talk a lot. Your background as a nurse, you touched on near-death experiences and your past work with patients who have died or just died, or in the process of dying, might have been in a hospice environment or whatever. Um, this is an area that's fascinating. There's an elderly English gentleman called Peter Fenwick. He wrote a book called The Art of Dying.
Oh yeah,
He's
I've used that.
a neuropsychologist, and he's been studying this for 40 years or something like this, about life after death, and it's difficult to get information from this area because of the code of ethics that nurses have, that you're not allowed to discuss with just a writer or somebody who just wanders into a hospital and says, what happens when a patient dies? Do you see anything? Do you hear anything? Because that would be ethically inappropriate. Um, so I've been told, and so he's kind of written about. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of stories there, because he tells the stories of the people that he's interviewed, nurses, etc., people who work with the dying or the dead. And the stories, you alluded to it earlier on. You said something about some people see relatives might arrive, or all of a sudden there might be a strange, wispy, smoky-like substance that might appear around them, or a draft of air, or strange things happen with birds outside the window, or there's many kind of strange things that happen with the dying and the dead at the moment of death, or close to death. And I think
right
that's probably
after death too.
Or
Yes.
right afterwards.
yes.
Right
So I
following.
think that's influenced your writing as well. But I'm wondering, is there any stories that you could tell that would qualify that?
Okay. I worked at ICU. I worked
Hmm.
ICU for years. I worked telemetry. I worked OR. I also have my PhD. I also taught at LSU nursing school. So I taught a lot of students. And what happens when a lot of students come in, they're terrified of dead bodies. They're terrified of death. They're terrified of having losing patients, and what do I do when they die? What do I say, and all that. And that's something you have to pick up with time, because you remove death so much from society. But um, let's see. Um, I have had a patient. She died. She coded, and we were after somebody dies, you get a morgue pack. So you wrap them and you put a morgue pack, and we put the toe tag on, and we take them down to the freezer, and we put them in the morgue. She had died. We removed all her tubes and
Oops.
everything. Oh, there you go.
Sorry about that.
Right.
I was going to
That's
play that later and it just popped right on. Keep going. I'm
we,
sorry for the
we
interruption.
took all these tubes and everything off of her, and there was some. I walked in with another nurse into the room, and it was just. She said, "Do you hear that?" And I said, "What?" She said, "There's somebody whispering in here," and I'm like, "There's no TV or anything
Ah.
on." Next thing we know, I'm not, and this is one of these things freaks you out. This woman's arm, she was dead as a doorpost, rose up and then crossed over her chest. Now this woman was dead, and it was like that's the way she had to be. So we both looked at each other, and it's like, okay, now what do we do? I guess we just put her like that. So um, I had that happen where a dead body actually crossed her hands over that. I've heard whispering, but what a majority of it is patients who are dying that see dead sisters, dead parents, dead
Hmm.
pets,
Hmm.
and they're talking.
Mhm.
And I've actually walked in and had patients sitting there talking away. She's by herself in the room. And I'm like, sweetheart, who are you talking to? Oh, well, my brother's here. Where's your brother?
Oh,
Oh, he died in the war 20 years ago.
oh
And
my.
he's in here. Yeah, he's in here. He's sitting next to me. He said he's waiting for me.
And these aren't patients with dementia
Wow.
or anything like that.
No, no, no.
They just all of a sudden
The
visited.
dementia, the patients with dementia will
Mm.
talk about, um, usually talk about people who are still alive.
Mm.
And that's what I've noticed a lot of times. You see the dementia patients usually talk about, oh, my sister. So where's your? And the first thing you ask as a nurse, where's your sister? Oh, she lives in so. Well, sure enough, there the sister walks in the door to come visit her. So, but and what happens before someone dies? They become very lucid. They don't become more confused. Usually, people rally before they die. They become very clear. They become whereas they may have been confused, they may have been unconscious, they can wake up and they're very clear. And you see that rally before they die, and that's usually when you start seeing people. I've seen parents, brothers, sisters, children. I remember one lady talking, she was crying, and I was like, "Yeah, daughter, what's wrong? Why are you crying? My son's here." And her son had died in
Oh.
a car accident 10 years before, and she said, "He's here. He's here. I can see him." And it upset me at the time. I was like, I'm holding her hand. She's like, "He's here. He's comforting. He's here." And she was dead 2 hours later. So, look, there's a rule of thumb. If they're talking to dead family members that are actually dead, like I said, you get the code card and you put it by the room because they're going to code. And
Wow.
I
Now,
think
do you?
I didn't know. I did it. I did I worked with a friend of mine who she was a psychologist, and we collected data on nurses with deathbed visions who had taken care of patients and patients talking about deathbed visions and things they had seen. And we collected data from nurses in Maryland and here and got about 500 nurses to contribute and tell stories. And there were a ton of them. One was like one patient talked about Jesus was going to come get him in a white pickup truck. And
A white
also,
one, of course.
a white pickup truck. Jesus coming.
Was it a Charger?
I don't know. It was a pickup truck. Honey, down here it's an
Yeah,
old
not a
pickup
pickup
truck usually. So there were a ton of stories, and they were all. And sometimes they saw Jesus figures, somebody who was like Jesus. It was mostly family members. Sometimes it was just angels.
Hmm.
Sometimes they talked about angels with wings and light. Sometimes they talked about specters of light dancing around the room, and they could see them. But it was never. They were never afraid. They were never scared.
Yeah.
They all talked about how it comforted them and
No,
how they
that
Exactly.
is. I mean, that's absolutely mind blowing to me because that correlates what Peter Fenwick has written about all his life, and it just on this show, Scotty. I mean, that's
Yeah.
for Alex to say that. It's kind of rare to get a nurse, and all the she can qualify all the statements that
no,
other
I helped do the study, and we could, like I said, we collected
yeah.
like 100 stories, and they were all the same.
Yeah, and I think what's very comforting about that is that whatever archetype of comforts the dying will present themselves, whether it's a relative that they immediately recognize, yeah, and they calm down, or whether it's something else. If they don't have a relative or something else, something will be provided to comfort that person as they're passing. That's why I think you'll agree that a lot of nurses have written about strange wisps of what look like smoke or drafts of air or something passing through the room, or somebody might just smile, or like the woman who in the morgue who crossed her arms, or something is there to passage these people in the calmest possible way into wherever they're going, so that there's no sense of terror of death,
No.
or absolute panic or anything like that. Something will present itself to that person at the moment of death, or shortly before death, or after death, to guide them through.
And sometimes you have stories of people who are not the dying who have seen that or seen fringes of that and said there was a woman in a white dress that was standing at the bed. Now she's gone, and of
Yes.
somebody who had passed on. I've heard stories like that.
Yeah,
So-
I've heard tons of stories, and I've read. Every nurse you talk to will have a story. Every nurse you talk to will have a story, and not doctors so much, because they're not at the bedside. Nurses are at the bedside. Nurses get to know that patient. Nurses know the family coming in. Nurses, are caring for that person or comforting that person. That nurse is going to be with them for an entire shift. A doctor may come in and out once or twice. So that's why, but you do have some hospice doctors that work a lot, but most of the time it's nurses that do it.
Philip
Mike.
Blair says in the chat room, there's also a video of Carl Jung talking about what's common among his patients in the moments before their death. So interesting.
My grandfather, when he was in the last days of his life, I left school and moved in with them and was taking care of them. And I was with him at his deathbed. And he sat up, huge smile on his face, and said, "David, you never met my mother," and pointed and introduced me to his mother and to my and then my uncle, who had passed away when I was 10. He said, "Oh, Gordon's here," and relatives were he was introducing as they were coming through the door,
Mhm.
and then he looked at me and laid back and just gave up a very comfortable sigh and passed.
Mhm. Yeah.
And my parents, who I'm staying with now, they're in their 90s. My mom's recovering from having just broken her leg. And um, when they were in their 80s, they had taken care of an elderly woman from the church. And they were at her death's bed, um, one on either side of her, both holding hands with her. And she let out the most peaceful sigh, she said, my mom said, and then this stream of golden light passed from her up through the ceiling.
Mhm.
And she didn't say anything. And there were nurses in the room and stuff. And she said to my dad when they stepped out, she said, "Wow, I, I think I saw her soul leave." And he goes, "That stream of golden light." And so he had seen it too. And neither of them said a word in front of the nurses and stuff. They just had both witnessed the same thing. And they just said it was like this pure golden light just passed from her and up through the ceiling.
Yeah.
Wow.
I had
Well,
a
how you holding up over there, Alex?
fine.
Okay.
Always up
We're,
late every night writing anyway. Are you kidding?
you'd just be writing anyway. Yeah, yeah.
Or Italia starts texting me about 10:30, 11 o'clock. So there we go.
Oh, there. Yeah, yeah.
I do
I
most
get
of my writing between midnight and 4 a.m.
most of my texts from Italia at 10:30 at night.
Yeah, that's when she starts. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Up at night contacting us.
Yes.
Now, do you mostly write horror? Is that your
I
thing?
I've written most genres except fantasy and sci-fi, but horror thriller. That's really I started out like I think most female writers do, anyways, with romance, but it's horror thriller now. I really enjoy that. Is the horror thriller. It's just more
That's
fun.
Born Flippy. He's a friend of mine, Rick. He's out in Denver, I think he is right now. But he said a little earlier, and there's no way to have you answer this, but I wanted to address it. He said, "Scotty, I'd be interested in what Alex thinks of my Demons of the Mind experience. It was in one of your early Intrepid magazine issues. She has dealt with mental health as well as the physical." Now, I do not, and forgive me, Rick, I do not remember the details of that story. I remember I published Intrepid magazine from 2011 to 2014. So that's when Rick wrote that article for me, and we put it in the magazine. So that's quite a ways back. I can't remember what I had for breakfast. So I'd have
Because
to
he's a
review
writer.
that because I'm a writer.
Right.
There you go. So that doesn't give you much to go on, but your experience with mental health. I don't remember the particulars of Rick's story, but what have you found with mental health and as it relates to these things we're talking about? Maybe you've already covered that. Did you already say?
I am not a psych nurse at all. I don't do psych. So, but I
Okay.
can talk about. You're always going to have patients that have come in that have mental issues. I mean, and they don't necessarily end up in a psych unit. They'll end up in a medical unit, especially if they have a medical problem. So we've had that kind of patient to deal with. So I mean, and I've been a nurse a long time, and there was a hospital down here called Charity Hospital. And Charity Hospital was like the second largest indigent hospital in the country. And
Mm.
Charity was a crazy place. And Charity got a lot of crazy people. And that's where all the residents did all their internships, where they did their residencies. It was a huge hospital, and they shut it down after Katrina. But you got a lot of mental illness in there. So I saw a lot, and I don't, you have a lot of people with the chemical imbalance stuff versus the nurture stuff. I think it's a little bit of both, but I do think sometimes I have met some people that you just look at them and you deal with them, and there's something intently evil about somebody.
Mm.
It just sometimes you meet somebody and they just back off, stay away, and you've had patients like that, and kind that make you really uncomfortable, and every nurse will tell you that's taking care of that one, watch that one, go in there with somebody else, somebody, don't go in there alone, and so the true root, I mean, I think there's chemical imbalance, yes, for some. I think there's, upbringing, abuse for other things, but I do believe that some people are just,
Well, expand on that a second here. It makes me curious to ask. Um, I know we all get that feeling to a certain extent about people. It's not always in a deathbed situation or a hospital situation. You can walk in a room and feel it off of somebody sometimes. But what is it that you think you're feeling when you get that? Are you feeling evil, that this person themselves might be very dark and very evil, that they're possessed by something dark and evil?
Well, if not possessed, do you ever the ones that seem to be just soulless?
yeah.
They just seem empty.
I look at the way I was raised and my upbringing in dealing with ghosts and living in the French Quarter and doing all that opens teaches you not to shut down but to open up. And so you tend to listen more to what your gut tells you, the spirituality, and opening up to those things and saying, okay, well, that's all right. And sometimes I've had some patients that just really, one guy in particular, I will never, ever, ever forget him. Um, you just looked in this man's eyes, and there was just there was something wrong here, and he really, and he did end up killing people, and
Right.
he just he wasn't right, and it just sometimes you just look at people and you there's just something not right in there, and it's not a psychological thing, but it's something that just makes you recoil, and just you can just feel it,
Sure.
and
I get
demon,
that.
devil, I don't know, but yeah, I do think there are some people that are just evil.
Um,
That's yeah. Go ahead,
Go
Scott.
ahead, Sarah. No, you go. You don't talk very much tonight. So you
I
haven't.
mean,
So
that's fairly common because as you were saying earlier with Alex about being a nurse, you encounter people in a lot of different mental states, especially if you're in the hospital, you're more like in a more down, sometimes vulnerable, sometimes excitable, or you come across all sorts of types of mental states, and like just like in the paranormal field where if you've done it long enough you develop an affinity
Hmm.
for it. It's the same thing with nursing in a way, that you get a sense of people. It said, oh, this person's
Hmm.
feeling happy, this person's feeling sad, this one has a feeling of desperation. Could be drug seeking behavior, or whatever it is that you're looking for in the unit that you're in, because you're trying to treat these people and make things better. With her, especially as a writer, her most of her focus is developing that evocative state. You're trying to evoke an emotion through your books, or a type of mental state. You're trying to lead people from uh, one place to another. You try to get into this sociopathy, or psych psychological issues of your antagonists, right?
Right.
The people that you have to,
I will sit there. First thing I will say is nursing made me a better writer, because
yeah,
huh?
nursing really made me understand the human condition to a
right,
point that people on the street don't understand it. I've seen people at their best and at their worst.
exactly.
So, and
I feel the same
that
way
is,
about bar managing.
yeah. Well, and
Or
bartender,
bouncing.
nurse. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
That's a type of
different,
therapy.
but same drug, different, different setting. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and let me tell you, a lot of nurses develop a very good gut, because you can just sense something's not right with the patient. You just like, I don't know, I don't like this, I don't like where this one's going. Put another lead on them. hook them up to this, open that IV wider, just something not right here, and sure enough, that patient will go bad quickly. So, and you see that, I think, with the nurses who are a little bit more open to seeing different things and stuff. But there's a lot of nurses out there that you nurse by your gut that tells you there's something not right here. And that goes along with seeing some patients that just, man, I don't like that one. And I've had nurses come out, I don't like that patient. I don't want to go back in that room. And who wants to switch with me? Or I don't want to go in that room unless somebody's with me. And yeah, we've had patients like that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you're developing that bond with the patient as well. You're trying to make them comfortable, or find out what's going on in their life, and this and that. Forming that bond, which it's kind of like almost like a psychic link, a temporary psychic link.
And you don't have a lot of time to establish that. I mean, you're very vulnerable in the hospital. You're very afraid, and then you get these new people coming in every 8 hours. And it's like, hello, my name is, Alex. I'm going to be your nurse tonight. Roll over and let me shove this suppository up your ass. I mean, you got to develop a really good rapport with people in a short amount of time.
Right.
So,
Well, yeah, I had a story I'm not going to
relationship with
repeat for tonight because I've repeated it before. But when I was in the hospital about a year ago, I had 3 nurses. I wasn't supposed to sit up. I'd had the coat hanger run up from my crotch to my heart, to look at things, seal things up.
The sandbag on your thigh, right?
Yeah. They go up there, and you have to sit still for 3 hours. I can't get up. I can't raise my head, which is the most frustrating thing in the world for me. But they detected a little blood coming out of that from that, or they thought I was bleeding, and I had 2 nurses rip my gown back, so there I am naked to the world, and 2 women with applying pressure, trying to alternate. Then they called in, who, pardon me for saying this because you're a nurse, but affectionately referred to her as Gunther. I am Gunther. I am the head nurse. And she came in, and she told them, no, back out. And she applied pressure. I thought she was going to burst my intestines. The way she was.
Better than do that instead of bleeding out. That's what they were worried about.
That's what she was worried about.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I got to hold this for 20 minutes. And I said, 20 minutes? I said, I'm not going to have any feeling left. You're going to have to amputate my leg when you're done. And but as it turned out, it was just a little blood on the bandage. It was not on the dressing.
When you have those angios, you really got to watch that femoral artery when you go up that way, because it's like, you can bleed out. I've seen people bleed out real fast, and I mean shoot out, like it shoots out.
It's a matter of minutes. It's a matter of minutes.
Wow.
Real fast. So that's why it's like I'm going to shove my elbow in your groin and make.
That's probably what I want to say. That's probably what she did, but
that was the tame version of the story. Let's not go any further.
There is a very bad portion of that story. I will tell you this. I told them, I really have to shit, and they were like, we don't care, you can't get up. And they got a bedpan. I said, I am not going to poop in a bedpan in front of 3 women with my nakedness hanging out in the.
Nobody cares. Women,
I cared.
Nurses have more penises waved at them than flags on the 4th of July. We do not care.
I will say I wasn't waving at them. I was, it's like, well, okay, I guess I'm naked now.
All we care about is keeping your ass alive. That's it.
I will say that I think I managed to get through that very painful moment, and in more ways than one, with a good sense of humor. I kept trying to keep a good sense of humor. Now, what are you as a nurse?
No respect, but a good sense of humor.
I had no respect, but I had a good sense of humor. I was trying to make a joke out of it, but there it is.
How much do you want to bet Rainey paid them $20 to do that?
And now
keep him out of commission for a while.
I want you to pull back his gown and put your elbow in his crotch.
And Gunther says, don't worry, the little tiny things like that don't bother us.
Oh, we see blood all the time. Yeah. It was not
Alex,
a little tiny thing.
Alex, can I ask you another question? Just kind of a general question. You described yourself as a horror author, not exclusively, but you're interested in the horror
Thriller, I think. Did
genre.
you say horror? Or
Yeah, you
Thriller,
did.
I know
Thriller and
thriller,
horror.
horror. Are they interchangeable? You think?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I read a lot of so-called horror novels. This term post-horror is one I'm kind of fond of because it tends to dwell on the psychological aspects of horror rather than say monsters and ghouls or slashers or
Hmm.
or serial killers or
Hmm.
not even mythology, just humans. Kind of, you mentioned mental illness earlier on, more like the breakdown of humans within their minds. Can is it really happening or is it not happening? This whole current swathe of very good authors who are writing about psychological horror, it's called post horror, which is kind of holding the mirror back up to ourselves instead of focusing it back out into mythology or into tropes, standard
Hmm.
tropes, and kind of holding the mirror back at us. Is that something that you're a fan of, or you'd be interested in writing about?
Actually,
It-
that's what the book. It's been pegged as psychological horror, psychological thriller. The
Mm,
River of Ashes, the Saint Benedict
mm,
series, just because of the horror element and
mm,
the rape, and it just kind of like that's holding up a mirror to society kind of
mm,
deal. It's been called that.
mm.
Yeah, I think um, there's I see ebbs and flows with horror. Um, there was a big push like 2 or 3 years ago, actually before the pandemic and the lockdowns, of the the real monster horror and all was coming, and then suddenly it's kind of pushed back more to psychological horror now, probably because we've all been through a psychological horror with all everything. So I see it turning. I look at it like you like you were saying, you show the mirror out and then you turn the mirror in, and that's what I'm seeing now. And I kind of prefer the psychological horror more, um, just because you have to do a lot more introspection on your
Because
character.
it's a lot more uncomfortable, isn't it?
Yes,
And as a reader, you're reading this and you're like, hey, that's me, or that could be
Mm.
me,
and that's, yeah, that could be me. That's,
Mm,
there, but for the grace of God, go on, sort
mm,
of deal. So, yeah, and that's what I've done with this book by showing how this character is, and making people uncomfortable. And it's
mm.
not so much a gore factor; it's a psychological. Ooh, this person is really, creepy, mean, and yeah. So I do enjoy that kind of horror.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great writers. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I mean, your River of Ashes now, it's getting great reviews, Alex. It's getting fantastic reviews. So
Thank you.
I'm definitely going to pick that up. It sounds like something that's kind of crosses a couple of different boundaries, as you
Yeah.
said, and it covers aspects. The YA thing is also something that It's a very grey area these days because some books you think is adult horror and you read it and you go, this is YA. It's just yeah, anything.
Sure.
I'm not a
I've done.
romantic. I'm
I've
not a
done.
romantic guy, so I don't want to read about teenagers falling in love or breaking up or anything like that. And
Honestly, it's YA adult. It's whatever the publisher wants it to be. That's really where it's
yeah,
at.
and that's what's hard to define, and that takes a bit of research. And maybe you can try an author and you read and go, no, that's YA, or it's more geared towards that market, and so he's going to be advertised as that kind of writer.
Hmm.
Uh, and then sometimes they even put when you're looking for books, suitable for people 16 and over, or 18 or
Right.
over, or whatever it is, and then okay, they're kind of in the YA, but they're kind of going out of the YA. So yeah, it's an interesting time for horror writers in that because horror writers are writing a lot more about psychological issues and turning the mirror back on themselves.
Hmm.
YA or the kind of good versus evil stuff publishers are kind of, well, we can't promote it as adults exclusively because there is this good versus evil, or girl, gets boy, or boy gets girl, or whatever it is, or there's a certain sweetness to the story which could appeal to 16 to 18-year-olds, or 14-year-olds or 15-year-olds. So we have to advertise that as YA, whereas the author might be horrified at that tag, because to them it's a total horror story. But because there's a bit of sweetness somewhere in it, it's kind of tagged as YA. So it's complex. As a reader, I find it complex to look for really good horror novels in the psychological genre.
You have to look at who's publishing it too.
Yeah.
Because if you're going, stick with your horror publishers who are going to publish more. But if you get somebody who publishes more YA, they're going to promote it more YA. So it all depends on who publishes it too, because the publisher really will determine the genre nowadays. That's the way I see it. That's where.
Now, do you have Vesuvian doing a lot of your books, or do they do all your books?
They have been doing. They're doing the Ashes series. They did Blackwell. But she's got Rosewind too, and I did one with Rosewind because she made me write a romance, but I put ghosts in it, so I was happy. So yeah, we're doing that. But I've got some other stuff coming out with other publishers too.
Okay.
So I just do a little bit of everything.
Well, we've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to dispatch everyone else other than Alex. And Niall, thanks for coming in. I appreciate you, brother.
It was a pleasure
from you.
Pleasure to talk to you, Alex. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure talking to you too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Sarah, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. I'm going to let you go now.
Right. It was nice meeting you. Nice seeing you. See you guys later.
Great having you here, Sarah. I'll talk to you soon. And Uncle Dave?
Nice meeting you, Alex.
Nice meeting you too, Dave.
I'm sure the kids all say hi.
Yeah.
But they're all in bed.
Yeah.
So.
As they should be. Talk to you later,
Alex.
Scott.
I've known Uncle Dave. We call him Uncle Dave because my kids call him Uncle Dave. That's why he's Uncle Dave in the chat room here. He's been a friend of mine
Way too many
for 30
decades
years.
have gone by. Yeah.
So, all right. We'll see you later, Dave. All right. Now, we already did this a little earlier. People can find your books. I know they can find you on Facebook under your name, Alexandria WEIS. One S on WEIS. I did that when I was putting the show together tonight and putting up the graphic. I posted the graphic, and then I looked at it and went, oh, I typed 2 S's. And so
one S is Austrian, 2 S's is German.
Oh, there you go. So you're Austrian.
Mm-hmm.
Austrian name. And of course, you're also on Instagram under Alexandria.
And Twitter under Alexandria WEIS.
And Twitter. So you can find her in all those places. Now, do you have a website under your name as well?
AlexandriaWEIS.com.
There it is, AlexandriaWEIS.com. So there's no shortage of good, solid ways to find her. And before you go, while we're talking, this is about a minute long, maybe 30 seconds. Before I let you go completely, I was going to play this, and I started it accidentally a little early. Here you go. Here's the rain on the slate in Jackson Square.
That's in the Pablo Cafe, yeah.
Nice.
Cool.
You hear voices. There's people all over. Yeah. I don't hear the monk singing, though.
No, we have to do that at night when it's foggy. It's just nice. Just sit in a cafe and watch the rain.
Sometimes I like to put on stuff like this when I go to sleep at night. I'll play rain. So I thought I'd play that because you mentioned it. There it is.
That's a
rain
cafe. That's a good little cafe too, right on the corner of Jackson.
I have to visit there. I have to go see that place. Well, Alex, thank you for all your time tonight. Thanks for sticking around here for 2 hours.
No, thank you, Scotty.
Hopefully it only felt like 1. So
yeah, it was fun. fun. I really enjoyed it. And thank you. I'm glad we got to do this.
I'm glad, and I hope I'm sure we'll stay in touch, but I hope your books do well. I hope this TV thing goes as well as everybody thinks it might.
Crossed. I got a voodoo priestess working on it right now, so we'll see.
Fantastic. Voodoo. All right. Alex, thanks for being here, and I'll talk to you again soon. You have a good night.
Scotty. Love you, darling. Take care.
Love you too. Talk to you soon. All right, guys. That was Alexandria WEIS. And I hope you enjoyed this show. We're going to get out of here. It's 11 o'clock and 40 seconds. So you all, Alex, I see you still out there in the wings. If you want to sit there for a minute, I'm going to hit you up after we're all gone here. And so everybody, you have a good night. Thanks for being here. Thanks for giving me your time. And we'll see you again tomorrow night with Robertson at 4 p.m. Central, and then Wednesday and Friday at 9 p.m. Central. So you all have a good night, and I'll talk to you soon.